Now I'm getting super nervous because we're recording.
We might not do anything.
I'm gonna like sneak out.
Okay, then share second.
I know.
Accountability.
Don't make anything up.
Yeah.
Share the screen.
Sorry, my whole strategy just went out the window.
Ask me anything.
And we're gonna set the slide.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right. Again, welcome everyone. And I just wanted to reiterate ESR. When you hear ESR, it stands for Enterprise Systems Renewal. You'll learn about what it is. By the end of the hour, you'll have a good picture of what we're talking about and where we're going with ESR and why it matters to every single one of us here. And like I said, we're aiming to create a two-way channel of communication within ITS about this. So everyone should be able to walk up to anyone that's involved in ESR or their neighbor and have a conversation, ask questions, pose questions on Confluence. And so today is going to be kind of in that mode of please chime in. If you're in here in person, just go ahead and chime in. If you're on Zoom, you can click on the chat box. We have folks monitoring the chat and pull those questions up as well. And we hope to keep it going as a two-way communication. So we do have a panel of folks who are well versed in parts of ESR, and so we're bringing everyone together. We didn't include everyone. There are a lot of people involved. It's just to get started with some facets of ESR. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to ask the panel members. I'll just call out your name, but go ahead and tell us your full name, your role in ITS, your role in ESR, and throw in how many years you've been at UC San Diego. And we'll go from there. We have panel folks spread across the 3 different locations. Let's start with Cal.
Yes. So Cal Jamboki, my role at ITS is the PPMO manager. My role within ESR is the ESR program manager. And I have been here for, I think, around 5 years now.
Oh, time flies.
Yeah.
David?
David Hutches, ITS Enterprise Architect. I just do whatever Cal and Mojgan tell me to do. Participate. I've been at UCSD somewhere between 20 and 30 years, depending upon whether or not you include grad school.
Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. Is Prachi in the room with you guys?
No.
No.
All right. Let's
Hello, Marjan, this is Prachi. I'm on Zoom. I'll be joining.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'm in 2 minutes. I'm Prachi. I'm working on ESR to represent Lean Bench, putting people and processes before technology. Been with UCSD for 3 years and excited to be on ESR.
Thank you. Wade?
Can you hear me? We just
Yep.
My name is Wade Blomgren. I work for Educational Technology Services as part of Academic Technology Services as part of ITS, formerly in MS, ACS, ICC, etc. I've been with UCSD anywhere from 32 to 45 years, depending on whether you count volunteering in wet labs, washing radioactive glassware in junior high school.
Don't shake hands with Wade.
Don't touch Wade. Don't get too close.
Anyway, I've been here for 32 years, yeah, I think that's about it.
All right, Jonathan?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Whitman. I am the SIS Tech Lead. Been here for 20 years.
All right. Wow. Okay, in this room, Bill?
Bill Sweetman, financial, payroll, HR, but on ESR, the technical lead for financial systems. Been here for 3 weeks.
Just over 10 years.
Natalie?
Yeah, now we go here. I manage the data and integration services team here in ITS. So my team currently is laying down the pipe for the data integration for all the SaaS packages that we're getting from the ESR. I've been with UCSD for about 4 years now.
Okay, great. Judy.
Judy White, and I lead the Business Intelligence Analytics group in ITS. I've been here for a little over 3 years. And as far as ESR is concerned, anything with regards to reporting out of the ESR systems will be in our team's responsibility.
Reporting?
We don't build the reports, we build the tools so you can do your reports.
Keep saying that.
Yeah, keep saying that.
Be super clear about that.
Mike?
I'm Mike Korn. The CISO. I manage the security office and identity management. Identity management is going through a large replacement project, which is an ESR project. I've been here 14 months. It just feels like 35 years tall of age. 14 months.
Wow, awesome. And then I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Moshkan Amini. I work in the process management continuous improvement group. My role in ESR is to be a liaison to technical folks across campus and staff here at ITS with regards to channels of communication, of getting information back and forth between ESR and what's important to you all, what you're doing. And then, please, Kevin.
My name is Kevin Chow. I work in business technology services. My teams are responsible for the portfolio of business and administrative applications. Many of you know them as some of our mainframe applications, as well as a large collection of homegrown and vended systems. On ESR, I am the program director. I don't know what that is other than to fill in gaps and do whatever the team says needs to be done. Really excited to be here. I've been at UCSD somewhere between 10 and 15 years, depending on whether or not you count undergrad. We count everything.
I've been here 12 years, I forgot to mention. All right, Kevin, can you kind of give us the spiel?
Right.
What really ESR is.
So this slide deck, as Mojgan mentioned, is not slide heavy. The goal here is to just provide a very high level overview and scope of ESR, hopefully giving some insight into some of the areas that will be touched. And the goal of this is at the end for y'all to have as much time as you need to ask questions to keep this the beginning of a long-standing two-way dialogue, and the least amount of people running for the hills will be great. So what is ESR? Enterprise Systems Renewal is a program that was started at the beginning of this fiscal year. And really the goal was to look across our entire enterprise and find ways to modernize and streamline those business processes campus-wide. Now, of course, the technology that underline the business processes will be touched as a result of these efforts. But from everything that we were able to dig up, it is the largest business process and technology improvement program ever undertaken at UC San Diego. So 56, 57 years. This is going to be one of the largest undertaking ever. Okay. And why are we doing this? So why renew our enterprise systems now? The reason is because when we started to inventory and to interview subject matter experts and process experts across the campus, primarily in the areas of human capital, HR, finance, student administration, and research administration, we have learned that over the last 10 years, we've dealt with unprecedented growth of the university without adding a heck of a lot of bodies, which means what we've done is we put in a ton of elbow grease. And that elbow grease is going to start running out as we are projecting to continue to increase the growth of student enrollment, research revenue, as well as patient care activities over the next 10 more years. And so in order to prepare ourselves for this growth or this expected growth, what we're looking at is improving our business processes. So helping the people who keep the lights on in this place be able to do their jobs better. And us as the technologists in ITS are going to be there along the way to make sure that the technology is keeping up with those process improvements. And so we'll talk a little bit about why we're tackling processes first before we start implementing technology, because as many of you know, having been on projects here, you take a broken process and implement it in a technology solution, you just have a very, very broken process in a new technology platform and nothing more. So this is why we're doing it, and this is why we're doing it now.
So do you know how many students we have?
Yeah, we have, I want to say 35,000 total students, and it's continuing to grow. I think the goal from the Chancellor's office is by 2020 to have 40,000 students enrolled. And so that is a pretty significant increase, which of course touches on not just our student information system, but all of our auxiliary systems, as well as our finance and our ability to recruit and retain top faculty to teach those students that we're intending to enroll.
So I asked that because I recall a conversation where we were talking with Wade. So he was here 3 decades ago, I want to say, where the campus was growing leaps and bounds, and we were approaching 15,000 students. We couldn't, it was very hard to manage.
Paper was running out.
Paper was running out. So, Wade, can you kind of give us a glimpse into that time and what happened?
Yeah, so in about 1990, we had, as you said, around 15,000 students. We had 2 enterprise systems in place then running on a Burroughs mainframe here in the data center in APNM. There was an accounting system called DAISY. It's an acronym. I've been able to resurrect what the for. And there was a student registration system. And so there was an enterprise renewal of a sort occurred in that time frame about 27 years ago. To replace the current student registration system with the system we know now as ISIS, or also Triton Link. So ISIS stands for Integrated Student Information System. And the financial system, DAISY, was replaced by IFIS, the Integrated Financial Information System. And these 2 mainframe mobile applications were obtained from a software vendor. Other schools were purchasing the same products at the time, and of course the dream was that those would become the industry standard core systems for universities. Didn't turn out. I think we're probably the last school standing for both those products, and that happened actually pretty quickly. So we took over ownership of those systems, and we've had them ever since. I brought with me, I don't know if you can see, I have all the documentation from that original systems renewal here. I'm kidding, those are just architectural drawings. But anyway, it was a change for the university, and I guess what I can say is we made it, and anyone needing emotional support during these next 3 years, feel free to come to my office. I'll have a little mug, you drop a nickel in. But,
so Wade's saying he's already gone through ESR once,
right.
30 years ago, and the results were, right?
Right.
All I know is I'm going to need an office right next to his. I'm going to need access to that mug.
30 years is a pretty good return.
Yeah. The great return.
Yeah, exactly. So what are we talking about when we are talking about enterprise systems renewal? It's easy to say all our enterprise systems, but here's a glance. If you can see what's on the screen, it's not everything, but it's kind of a grouping, a high-level grouping of pretty much most of the business systems across our university, our enterprise systems. So you can see not just systems are changing, but chart of account, common chart of accounts and ways of working, our processes, our ways of running business. We're looking at bringing more efficiencies in. So you can see financial information systems, human resources, and payroll. research administration, data everywhere, and analytics, student and faculty information. You can see those bullets there. You can, if any of them kind of look familiar to you because you're working on them or you were part of the original rollout of these systems. And then infrastructure to support all this, the growth of all of these systems. So do folks see things on that screen that they're working on or they've been, they're familiar with?
So, so to put some current lingo context to some of this, because of course a lot of these projects are named for what the new one is, but it doesn't tell you what the old ones were. And so to kind of go through it really quickly, under financial information system, we are completely redesigning our chart of accounts. In my opinion, and in the opinions of some of the financial experts on this campus, redoing your chart of accounts is a larger change to a institution than replacing your financial system. Okay, that has to sink in. I keep repeating it, but people keep telling me that no, getting rid of IFAS is the most important, is the biggest change. No, it's your chart of accounts. So as part of this activity, we are looking to realign our chart of accounts with the UCOP common chart of accounts that was designed back in 2014. They intend to roll it out by 2020, which means any campus that's not aligned with that chart of accounts will have to go through significant data transformation in order to report up on an annual and on a regular basis. By doing this, we have an opportunity to make sure that our reporting structure is already identical with what they're expecting. In terms of the financial system, we are looking to procure a new financial system from a vended package with the expectation that we will be implementing the GL, the general ledger, which replaces the core functionality of the IFAS system, and look to reintegrate. I think this is a very important point here, is to reintegrate all of the ancillary systems that need to persist as part of going live with a new GL and a new chart of accounts. So that would include a lot of your accounts payable system, a lot of your invoicing system with the new AR, which will no longer live in ISIS. So many of you know ISIS is actually where we run our accounts receivable, because way back when, the only thing that we had money coming in was tuition. That is no longer the case. And so the new financial system will take over GL with a new chart of accounts and AR, with the rest of the pieces to be reintegrated. The first functionality that will go out as part of the new financial system will be a campus-wide budgeting tool. Who knows what our current budgeting system is? Come on, we have a budgeting system right now, right? Because we do $4.5 billion of budgeting every year, right? What's our budgeting system?
I know.
Excel.
Yeah. Excel. Yeah, it's Excel and email. Okay, thousands and thousands of Excel spreadsheets. Yeah, we can call it whatever we want, but really at the end of the day, it's Excel, right? So that's our finance. Under human resources and payroll, you've all heard of UCPath. UCPath's current timeline has us going live September of 2019. That's the current timeline, and I'm going to stick with it until they tell me that it changes again, and it may or may not, right? So as part of that, we will be implementing PeopleSoft HCM version 9.2, which is essentially a vended PeopleSoft HR package. And from there, pieces of HR functionality will be delivered, including position management, position control, as well as a form of unit and department hierarchy that will need to be defined. Currently, as many of you know, that's coming out of our PPS data warehouse. That will no longer be the case when this thing goes live. Part of that change will involve deprecating any PPS plumbing, and so downstream applications such as our HR portfolio, as well as our financial portfolio, anything that is not being replaced by HCM out of the box will need to be reintegrated. Quality Research will replace COIUS. So many of you know the system COIUS as our proposal and award application that has reached end of life 6 years ago. And is in bad need for replacement. Qualico, which is a spinoff of the Quality Foundation that took over the IP for the COIA system, is now 4 generations newer than the version that we are on today. And so our $1.1 billion research enterprise probably deserves something a little bit better than the thing that was sunsetted 6 years ago. And so that project has already taken flight. So Kuali Research is a software as a service solution fully implemented in Amazon Web, and will be deployed here to replace COIAS, along with hopefully the deprecation of up to 4 compliance systems that are homegrown, which could potentially come out of the box as part of the Kuali portfolio. I'm not going to touch on data yet because that's kind of the one thing that's actually the coolest thing. So we'll touch on that last. Student and faculty information system. Those of you that know APOL, Academic Personnel Online, that system is being renewed with a product from a company called Interfolio, which will come with a module that handles faculty review, promotion, and tenure, along with a system called Faculty 180 that does data aggregation of academic activities, both from local systems as well as from third-party systems, including publication data, course survey information, proposal and award information, as well as information about any teaching and learning activities that they're doing here on campus. Our degree audit system, aka DARS, is being re-implemented with the latest version. Our version is woefully in bad need of an upgrade. And so as a result of some very necessary customization that took place, we are now rolling back the customization, re-encoding 10 years of our degree programs, and re-implementing the UAchieve system, which we have branded DARS. As part of that, pieces of our future state student information system will be implemented alongside ProSam, which is our new financial aid system, and Slate, which went live in March of this calendar year to handle all of student admissions and recruitment. And then finally, around this time next year, we will be procuring a replacement for ISIS. Infrastructure, Natalie called plumbing for all of the SaaS packages to talk to each other. That's the integrated, or that's the IPaaS, which basically stands for Platform as a Service. That will be the standard way in which information, processes, as well as data get integrated between multiple points. Hypercare was kind of branding for a single point of support and help. So as we're working through changes to business process as well as technology, we need to give people a helpline that doesn't involve 6 different places to call, 12 different ticketing systems to submit a ticket. We have to figure out a way to get one place shop or one-stop shop for our end users, so that way they know where to go if they have no idea if they're having an issue with their login, all the way to how to do a journal entry within a new financial system, to an error message in a new financial system, all of which would have to go through one place. Our identity and access management, you know it as single sign-on, Shibboleth, Access Link, Affiliates DW, My Affiliates, all the different pieces of our identity and access management system will be also renewed. And then some of you have heard of the Student Activity Hub, which is essentially the future state data warehouse for UC San Diego. Never heard of it. Judy is shaking her head. That entire columnar in-memory analytics platform from SAP will then be extended to include everything that is currently in our data warehouse today. But just, yeah, and most importantly, and the reason why I call it the most important piece is because that's actually the one thing that will touch every single user on this campus. So, you know, your transactional system is one thing, but what comes out the other end is actually the thing that people value the most. And so, so when we look at ESR, the one thing that I consider to be the most impactful to the largest population of users will actually be what they get out the other end, which is our analytics platform. Okay, so that's kind of a real quick tour across the scope of ESR, and there's probably another dozen projects that we're not mentioning right now because there's not enough time. But we wanted to touch on as many pieces of the big transactional systems as we can today, and then really give people an opportunity to ask questions, as well as you know, provide their initial emotional knee-jerk reaction, and then to have Wade be our our counselor. And Wade is now accepting appointments as of now.
So I'm going to minimize this so we can see everyone's face on the screen. I'm going to actually stop the share. And there we go. So I better look at the chat first.
There we go.
Actually,
Building's on fire. Usually.
Building's on fire.
Shannon. Oh, we have a hard time. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
All right. Shannon, I'm going to rely on you to go through the chat and just let me know if there are.
Sorry, I thought you said Sandon. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. All right. So here we go. You throw out some questions, and again, you guys have in-person chat or just through your microphones. You can chime in as well. So thanks for painting a big, large, beautiful picture. I don't know if it's beautiful.
Apparently people can't hear you very well if you could speak.
Okay, here we go. So Bill's sitting here. Let me pick on you first. I don't know, Kevin mentioned a lot of IFAS, ISIS, things getting replaced. Is ESR just an exercise to move off the mainframe? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Next question.
The most tongue-in-cheek.
Wrong answer.
Wrong answer.
Get out. Yeah.
You get out here uninvited.
No, I mean, just as Kevin said, it's really basic everything. So certainly our mainframe is the heart of all of our systems. But when you look at the financial side or the student side, there's a lot of things that go around all those systems. Financial link, Triton link, query link, data link, employee link, all those applications that kind of go around our transactional system. So it's really looking at all of those things.
So what's going to happen to the folks who are using the green screens and, day-to-day work? What's it going to look like?
We're going to get shiny new stuff.
All right. So they'll still do their work.
Yeah,
but...
So if you think about all of the things that we have done to improve the user experience of folks working with the green screen through raw IFAS, is a lot of our web applications, right? So think of Ivory, think of the web services and the screen scrapers that exposes the mainframe to the end user via the web, right? Like the suite of Financial Link and the Link family applications. What we're expecting is for people to be able to access their financial system 100% native in the web, which is going to be a big shift from folks that are accessing via terminal. Now, we know that there's a smaller population of users using terminals today, mostly for core functionality, people that are using PPS directly, using IFAS directly, or using ISIS directly. But the vast majority of our users are actually using our web-based applications. And so when we say, is this an exercise to replace the mainframe? Absolutely not, because if we were to replace the mainframe and nothing else, everything would actually break. And so looking through all of those processes that we would like to hopefully improve upon. The mainframe is actually the most efficient workhorse when it comes to transactional activities out there. In fact, better than most applications you can buy. But what we're looking at is not to replace just the transactional piece, but to actually look at improving people's experience and their interactions with our systems.
So that's a good point, because when Prachi, when you introduced yourself, you mentioned something like, I'm here to make sure we're processed before our technologies or something like that. Process before systems. What did you mean by that?
Yes, so I know that ESR is going and at the end of it, we're going to end up replacing a lot of key technologies that we have today with new, better, shinier systems, like Bill said. But before we do that, I think it's a really great opportunity for us to take a look at all the processes that have been built over years, either to work with the technology that we have, or we haven't had a chance to stop and look at the processes, if they still serve us in the best possible way, if they still are like simple processes that are easy for us to manage and are best for the technology that we are using, or best for the outcome that we are trying to deliver. So this is a great opportunity to stop and take a look at all those processes, and Lean Bench is here to help with that. We have already engaged with multiple projects that are currently taking place on the ESR, and they are identifying the processes that need to be looked at as a part of these projects. They are identifying which ones of those have most friction, are the most complicated processes that need to be looked at. And so Lean Bench is here to map out the current state of those processes, help measure those processes, analyze those processes, and see if there's opportunities to improve those processes before we put our technology in place without necessarily knowing how these processes need to evolve.
All right, thank you.
So one thing just to throw out there, the concept of a lean bench actually came out of this huge activity called Lean Six Sigma, right? So as all of us have gone through at the baseline Yellow Belt training, one of the things we did was we looked across the campus and identified some pretty large population of experts in process reengineering above the yellow belt, in the green belt, as well as the black belt level. And so what the lean bench is it's essentially something that ITS is managing out of ESR, but it's actually made up of people all over campus with high levels of certification in process reengineering. The idea is to deploy those resources on ESR projects so that way processes that are highly inefficient today can actually be reassessed in light of the technology that is going to be renewed. And so the concept here is to not take a broken process and just re-implement it in a new technology, but instead to look at those processes that originated decades ago when it was in paper and figure out, are we doing those things because that's how we've always done it, or are we doing those things because that's actually what needs to be done? And so that's where Lean Bench is going to come in. And so when we say process before the technology, that's exactly what that means.
Okay, so we said data a lot because that's really what all this is. The end user cares about the data, cares about entering or extracting data and what it means and deriving information from there. So how does getting access to the data or working with it going to look differently? So it's Judy, Natalie, let us know your pieces.
Okay. So at a core, the data access is going to change to some extent. I'll talk a little bit more from a reporting side and maybe leave the full access piece more than that to Natalie. But from a reporting side, many people, the tools they're used to using right now, you heard it a bunch of times during this conversation, QueryLink and VinLink, right? This is what people have been using to get at their data. That's going to change. We're going to make that data available through two tools right now that are our supported business intelligence analytic tools. Those are Cognos and Tableau. So our team will be busy building, to your point when you asked me this earlier, not reports, but we'll be building the interfaces by which people will create reports. And the terminology for those that have worked in either tools are data sources or packages, depending on if you're working in Tableau or Cognos, but they're the same thing, just the nomenclature from the different tools. We're setting up a community management system to support users in that transition, to help them learn how to use the tools and leverage the tools. We have subject matter communities, we have tool area communities, and our team will be very, very busy creating the activity hubs, which again, as Kevin pointed out, restructures the data on the new platforms because the new technology offers a lot faster performance and a lot wider range of use of the data, but we need to get it there and we need to make it present in both the tools. So that's our side of things. I'll maybe let you talk about
So one sec before, can you give us a sense of what's already been done? Because I think a lot of folks on the phone may not even know all the great work that you guys have already done today. So if you could share that real quick.
Sure. So I was kidding about the Student Activity Hub. That's been a huge effort for our team for the last little bit. We've been bringing in all kinds of data and getting it onto HANA, which is present in AWS, and making that data available to a pilot group who is now helping us with the QA of that data, and that's the first of our hubs to go out. We are integrally involved in the UC Path project, so don't be afraid. We're already well aware of what's going on, and we're making sure that we are on point and involved with that project and getting that data available to our users. We have a advancement activity hub that is in the works. We have the research activity hub, or I guess we're calling it now the faculty activity hub, is behind that. So all of that, we are learning to new technologies in the midst of that. We are learning HANA, we are learning about SAP, we are learning about how to get data into SAP and out of SAP. We're keeping our front-end tools upgraded, making sure that you have the latest and greatest capabilities of those tools and that we're familiar with the latest and greatest capabilities. So yeah, it's been a lot about activity hubs and tools.
Yeah, so my team also supports a lot of the data integration for the reporting services. So we help Judy. Yeah, we're very close partners actually. So we help Judy get that data into the SAP HANA platform using the SAP HANA tools currently, but right now we are laying down the pipes for the iPaaS, which is the integration platform as a service. So you can picture this as the data pipes that are going to bring the pieces of data from the different ESR packages together and funnel them in real time or in batch, depending on the needs, where they need to go. So some of the data is going to go toward the data warehouse, some of the data is going to be funneled down to some remaining systems that need to stay. So as part of the iPaaS, the platform, it has basically 4 components. We have the API manager, so we're trying to expose the data as much as possible in microservices, in API fashion, as opposed to connecting directly to the database and running queries and getting that data out and saving it onto your system. The other portion is we're adding the real-time streaming platform using Apache Kafka. So this will allow real-time data synchronization between different locations. There is also Informatica Cloud component. This is also the platform where we're going to be building the data integration, so the data transformation from a source to a destination. So as you say, so my team is mostly infrastructure oriented. So we're laying down the pipes to service all of this, the data needs eventually. So whether we want to be building an activity hub, a reporting infrastructure, whether we want to access operational data for day-to-day needs, we're going to be leveraging iPaaS, the iPaaS platform, to give access to that data.
So a couple of things that Natalie and Judy mentioned is that access to data will likely look very different. So gone would be the days of people running queries and downloading them to Excel spreadsheets, right? It likely will be very different, even for downstream consumers that are currently hooking up against the data warehouse on a nightly basis, downloading 10 years worth of data and then storing it locally in some desktop under someone's desk, right? And so the goal will, of course, shift the access to data for analytics and reporting purposes through one of the industry standard tools that are very, very accessible and commercially available outside of UCSD. So we're not having to utilize proprietary tool set here at UCSD, where it's going to take somebody 8 months just to learn how to be basically proficient at doing their jobs when they come to work here, but instead be able to hire people with that expertise coming off the street or out in the market. Additionally, for programmatic interfaces, we're shifting people away from doing a lot of the data movement and data visualization, away from homegrown systems downstream where they're moving large sets of data, storing a shadow copy, and then visualizing that using custom software. That is incredibly expensive and impossible to maintain, as we're seeing essentially remnants of that across the enterprise. And so the idea with iPaaS is to say, if there is a need for a distributed IT community to get access to data for whatever reason, they should go through that access in real time via an integration platform, as opposed to direct database connectivity. That's going to cause heartburns across the university. And so from a change management perspective, that is something that we will have to work through internally for all of the teams that are accessing data from the warehouse today, as well as for people that are outside hooking directly into DB2 on a regular basis.
It's worth pointing out that the current model brings enormous data risk to the institution from a security perspective, because I keep getting asked, are we securing IFAS and ISIS? And I'm like, yeah, but so what? We've got 5 times that amount of 5 copies of it in every department on campus, and we can't control that. So this is a big step forward.
Absolutely.
And one of the things maybe I forgot that I'd really like to point out also, in addition to risk, the other problem we have with everybody downloading is everybody uses it a little differently, and their definition for something is quite different. So we're actually implementing on top of all of this that Natalie and I are both working with, et cetera, is the governance catalog, where we have the end users, the SMEs, give us a governed definition for everything, and it's shared between whether she uses it in an API development or we use it in a report. The business term will always mean the same thing, and everybody will get the data according to those data terms.
Yeah, well, if you look at our data warehouse today, you'll find probably 15 iterations of the word start date.
Yeah.
Right. What does start date mean? And
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I bang my head against the wall to try and figure out which one to use, and can't make odds and ends of it. So I think data governance is a hugely important aspect of this move in terms of data analytics as well as data access. The one thing that we've discovered in analyzing a lot of the downstream applications is that when people are maintaining a non-transactional system, basically they're taking data, they're moving it to a place, they're modeling that data, and then they're visualizing that data. With the activity hubs and with iPaaS, the goal is to eliminate the first 2 steps. We'll move the data, we'll model it, we'll make it accessible, we'll make sure that there's a dictionary around it, but then you can then do what you need to do with it, whether it's integrated via transactions and or visualize it using one of the tools. And if you really want to, you can build custom software against our data store, if that makes sense to you. But what we don't want to do is we don't want people to replicate the data movement and the data modeling because of all the risks that we're talking about.
So another thing that kind of related to the data governance that Judy was talking about is that it normalizes decision support. Because one of the things particularly we see on the academic side is that a division will have its own model for the data and have an interpretation of what those data mean, what their analysis means, and the EDC's office will have a completely different one. And so from a budgeting perspective, the EDC will say, we're going to give you this money based upon your resource allocations, on what staff do, and so on. And the department or the division will say, oh no, that's not what our model says. And what this does for kind of across campus is it gives people sort of a normalized view of decision support so that everyone is looking at the same model. They may not agree with it, but it does at least allow people to have kind of a common view from a decision support perspective.
So David, what in your role from the enterprise architecture perspective and talking about all the plumbing, et cetera, so what approaches are being taken so the new solutions can sustain us for the next 3 decades and beyond? What are some guiding principles, what decisions and things that we're taking on?
Well, I'm not entirely sure what you're asking, but
how are we architecting our solutions so that it can be future-facing, sustainable?
Well, a key thing that you said there is, these things will sustain us for the next 30 years. But it's a very different notion of what it means to sustain for 30 years than what we thought in the old days. There was a time when we thought that the COBOL applications that we built in the, going back to the 1960s, but certainly the ones that we built 25 or 30 years ago, that we would continue to use the mainframe indefinitely, we'd continue to use these monolithic applications indefinitely, and the world would not change, right? But the world does change. Technology moves faster, and the rate at which it changes increases as well. And so the idea here is some of you may have heard this notion of a modular API-centric design. What that basically means is that we think of these new enterprise systems not as a monolithic mainframe application, but a set of services, however you define services, but a set of services that you then marshal together or connect together in meaningful ways to support the enterprise. What that means is that as new functionality comes around, we can marshal that new functionality in a much more agile kind of way than we've historically been able to do in the past. I'll give you an example. Many folks these days have probably read in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, wherever, about what machine learning and artificial intelligence and things like predictive analytics and things like that will do to change the workplace. Using our existing systems, it is painful to get data into a place where we can do reasonable data analytics on whatever data sets that we have. It can be done, but Judy can attest to the fact that it's non-trivial to do those kinds of analytics. And it's not dynamic either, particularly if you're having to work in sort of this batch mode. In this new world model kind of thing, new functionality for machine learning is going to come along on a daily basis, right? And new features are going to come around, and we need to be able to adapt to those kinds of new capabilities. And if you use the modular approach or an API-centric approach, what that allows you to do effectively is to, I won't say seamlessly because work is always involved, but more seamlessly integrate those new capabilities into our existing systems in ways that we have not been able to do in the past. Another example of this is, and Mike can attest to this as well, is that from the identity and access management perspective, social identity is an important function of how we describe the people that we have here on campus, particularly our student population. Integrating a social identity, whether that's your Facebook or your Twitter or your Google or your whatever, into our overall demographic view of our student population is a non-trivial thing to do right now. That notion of social identity is not going to change. And to the extent that we can create this sort of modular approach, we can more easily integrate those kinds of social identity features into our overall portfolio of information sources for the student population and possibly faculty and staff as well. Does that help answer the question, Moshka?
Yes.
And so practically speaking, so it's kind of taking that modular theory. Practically speaking, what we're talking about is making sure that any vendor we work with has that same exact strategy and same exact mentality, because we're not buying systems, we're not building systems for the functionality we need today. We're buying systems for functionality we can't even dream of, right? We don't even know about those functionalities yet. So how is their technology and their architecture going to enable us to implement this modular approach? So think of RFPs, right? We're evaluating these vendors not based off of what they can do today, but based off of what we think we might need them to do 5 years from now.
And this is a good point to chime in because David brought up identity and access management. One of the challenges we have, and I see this all the time as contracts come across my desk, is vendors have their own way of handling something as simple as authentication. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, just set up an account with us, right? Like we have to do with Slack, for example. And this is a problem for us because it means that the user experience is impacted, security is impacted, everything about how we interact with systems becomes messy. And so, if we had to define one big architectural principle, and this is, maybe scoped, I'm not positive, this is truly architectural. We want systems to authenticate through shibboleth. That is a key technology we're going to be using for the next decade, I would imagine. And there's several advantages to that. You don't have to use the entire feature set of federation that shibboleth offers, although it's worth looking at. But by relying on shibboleth, we allow a couple of things to happen. You give a consistent user experience. It makes federation with third-party organizations much easier, because more and more we're going to be letting people from other campuses and other institutions into our systems. And it allows us to build some centralized controls that affect everybody. So if you have a system that, for example, uses confidential data and it doesn't use shibboleth, an obligation you're going to have in about a year is to integrate it with our multi-factor solution. If you talk to shibboleth, you get that for free. It just happens, basically. So increasingly, we need RFPs to say, you must support shibboleth. Don't say SAML, say shibboleth. Just call it out, right? And see what the vendor tells you. You know, there are always going to be exceptions to these rules. This is just the world we live in. But this is the kind of guidance we need to start providing and thinking about throughout all of our operations.
It sounds like we're moving more towards vendor-provided solutions rather than building our own in-house solutions, correct? And then we want to make sure that they abide by certain requirements, principles, yeah. So that being one of them. In-house versus cloud?
So there's been a lot of discussions about, you know, build it versus buy it. David really wants to talk, so I'm gonna go, David.
Why should today be different than any other day?
I know, seriously. I just want to have the last word. No, I think a key word here is integration. You know, Judy can attest to the fact that our integration model, even though we have things like Informatica, our integration model from getting one information from or data from one monolithic system to another monolithic system is this weird kind of batch-like procedure where things come out, you mangle them, and they go in. And it's not manual, but it's potentially tedious. If you look at something like Slack or Facebook or Twitter, a naive view of those is that they are a messaging platform. It's, you know, if you're in Facebook, it's where you can send an infinite number of cat pictures to all of your friends, right? But in reality, what these are effectively is integration platforms. They have a model in which you can take all of these other services, many of which have nothing to do with Twitter or Facebook or Slack. They're actually external service providers that then they integrate through an API and make the integration platform actually more viable. And that's a good kind of holistic way of looking at what we're trying to accomplish here, is that at the foundation, essentially, we're trying to create an integration platform such that we can bring in new services in a transparent way. Because as Kevin was saying, the requirement for all of our service providers is that they have a robust API so we can do this integration rather than going through some kind of weird batch ETL kind of or data transfer kind of model. And so if you imagine something like Slack or Facebook or Twitter or any of these social media services or messaging services, what they really are is an integration platform. And that's kind of one of the aims that we have here. Okay, I'm done.
You know, there's one other thing I'll say that build on what David said, that we need to keep our eye on not just the user experience, but empowering the user to some degree. You know, you think about how we communicate with the students are probably the best example of this. They're not interested for the most part in using what we provide them. Even though we're giving them email for life, you know, students show up with 20 email accounts, and that isn't what they pay attention to. And as we move into this new world and we start embracing these social services, I mean, there's limits to what we can do there. We have an opportunity to change fundamentally how we interact with the population, and frankly, stop doing some of the stuff we do that's very difficult and expensive to do.
So the concept of buy versus build, so it's a great question because it comes up all the time when people say, so, you know, does this mean that we're never going to build software anymore? And the answer is Absolutely not. What this means is we're going to be much more strategic about where we invest custom software development. So what that means is, if there are certain things that are more commodity-like, things that are being built, being maintained by thousands of programmers, not here. We want to leverage that resource pool, right? We want to bring that capability in without building it ourselves. However, there will be things that there is no market for, and I actually can give some examples of that. We at UCSD have a very interesting way of handling our colleges. We have 6 colleges. This is not normal in other universities. And so in some cases, we actually have to build some custom software to support that uniqueness, right? That's what makes UCSD unique, and it's what makes us special. A GL does not make us unique and special, right? And so I think it's very important to say that software development is not something we're going away from. It's to say that we need to be much more selective about where we do custom software. And I would venture to say that custom software will never go away, because there will always be things that makes us unique and competitive out in the research world, as well as in the patient care and the student education world, that we will never want to give up. Just like the Apples and the Facebooks of the world, there are certain things that they don't buy. They build it themselves because it's what makes them competitive. And so we would follow that same exact model here. So when someone says buy versus build, the question would be, does that process that you're trying to fulfill or automate or to make better make us more competitive as the top 6th research institution in the country? And if the answer is yes, then I think we need to think twice about whether or not we're going to just buy the same thing that, number 1 through number 5 is using, right? And so that's just something to always think about. So there is no straight shot answer as to whether you always buy or whether you always build. It's much more, I think, much more sophisticated than that.
Well, I think the other thing is that from an application developer's perspective, the way that you're going to be programming is different. You're going to be hopefully leveraging these kind of common services more effectively than we've historically been able to do in the past, which is good because, to your point, it effectively allows us to concentrate on the unique parts of the solution and not have to recreate the wheel for the things that are essentially a commodity solution. And that allows the programming community, the application development community, to work on problems that are interesting and kind of, in some sense, proprietary to the way we do things as a university, and not waste their time building what everybody else has already built anyway.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So one of the first slides we saw were all the systems on one place with some dates out there, with a little asterisk that says some dates may change. So Cal,
tiny asterisk.
How fast are these projects moving, and are they on track?
Yes, they are on track.
Some definition of on track.
What is on track? No.
The volatility is very low on all of these projects.
Okay.
No, I mean, these projects, they're in their beginning phases where we're doing a lot of planning. But if we were to use the finance project as an example, I mean, we've hit, we've been going through our RFP and we've hit every single milestone. So there's definitely, a culture or like a mindset around ESR of delivering. So everything's been very positive.
So to kind of give a sense of some of the things that have delivered, the Student Activity Hub went into pilot in the winter of this past winter. Basically, went into kind of pilot mode, and several other activity hubs are already in planning. The student admissions and recruiting system, Slate, which is a module, right? A module of our future student information system, actually went live and delivered admissions decisions to 90,000 unique logins. And if those of you who have been here for a while, Mr. Bill Sweetman over here reminded me that every year around the March timeframe, we used to have big old messages that goes out to all ITS telling everyone, do not touch the systems because we're about to have this massive spike in utilization of my applications. And every year we go into this, I want to say this heightened alert mode because of the peak in demand on our systems. This year, I actually forgot that was happening, and then 2 weeks after the emissions decision goes out, not a blip on the radar, and luckily we didn't make Reddit again, because we get flamed on Reddit every year for how crappy our performance of our web applications are during this time of the year. But really, it goes to show that we can acquire some of the leading edge technology that's out there, bring it in, integrate it with our local applications, and deliver these innovations to our end users in a much more modular kind of way. And so, of course, Slate went out, and what you see in front of you here is the executive dashboard for every single ESR project that is currently in flight, along with a status and a summary. And then each of these projects are, of course, then represented in ITS Pro, with much more detail, OTL, and milestones behind it. But this is kind of a high-level view of all of our in-flight projects.
Yeah, and I want to just kind of point out, you can go into Confluence or colab.ucsd.edu, and you can just search for the ESR program or project dashboard, and this will come up, along with the individual dashboards for the projects as well. But, you know, the jumping off point, I kind of want to throw a tidbit out there. It's the ESR.ucsd.edu. The comms team have been putting a lot of effort into making that the jump off point for the ESR program and getting more information on the ESR program as well. So big thank you to Mark and Elaine for putting a lot of effort into that website.
Yeah, and if you go to esr-stage.ucsd.edu, you'll see a preview of the version that should be going out this afternoon. It's either Stage Dash or Stage Dash. Sorry, I got the Stage Dash ESR.
Ooh.
And so this is a utilization of the latest in our CMS. I think the templates that is being used here, it definitely is very different than the version that you'll see on esr.ucsd.edu. So this is the version that will be going out in probably the next 12 hours. Excellent. And so I wanted to give everyone a heads up. There's a blog also that we're inviting the campus community, not just ITS people, but to really talk about ESR and the impact and what that means. Talks about the lean bench. It talks about our new financial system, the chart of accounts, how we're sourcing experts from campus, kind of the overarching strategy and the why, the 30,000 foot why of why we're doing this. And then, of course, there will be launching points into each of the projects. And so what you see in Collab will then be also made available in a very public-facing way on the website. And so another plug, there is a newsletter that you can subscribe to, and we will then be pushing newsletters out on a monthly or periodic basis. So
this sounds like the best place to point people if we're talking about ESR. This is the first place to go, and yep. It can direct them to all the other.
And this will be the new ESR dot.
Yeah, this will be the new ESR dot. The current ESR dot has a lot of the same content. It's just it's using an older template. It's not as pretty. Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah. The first ESR website was put up by two guys and a pizza. Okay, now guess who the two guys are?
Some of the best things in the world are
two guys and a pizza. And then Elaine got her hands on it, and it became way better.
All right, Mike, you mentioned these new solutions must apply by SIP, etc. So that's one aspect of it. What about the way we provision systems today, the DSA model, access link, all that? What's going to change?
There's two things I'll say about that. One is just to plant a thought in people's head. as we rethink the identity management system,
Mhm.
we've identified multiple principles that will be guiding it. One that I think is important for everyone to start thinking about, and then I'll sort of pivot to your specific question. The whole notion that we have employee ID numbers and student ID numbers is very 1985.
Yeah.
We are moving to a unique university ID number. Well, you laugh. This sounds like a very bureaucratic back-end thing. When I say this to business people, they're like, "Oh my God, this will make such a difference in my life." I've been through this once before, and we said it'll never change. And every now and then they change for reasons of record consolidation or mistakes or whatever. But this is actually really tricky because of all the places these ID numbers end up. So I actually want to start a work group fairly soon to start looking at what does it mean to do this. And really, it's going to take a lot of work out by the people doing this. The one thing I can say about this right now is we're not going to have a 9-digit number that looks like a social security number. If I die with one thing, it will not be confusable with the social security number, like the mistake I made at my last institution, which wasn't my fault, by the way.
And then you left.
And then you left. Yeah. Well, what people do is they end up replacing the new ID number in the old SSN field or the old ID field.
That's why it looks like.
It's easy, but we don't want to do that. So there's that. The other piece, though, and this is actually going to be where it goes to what Kevin was talking about, business processes. Right now, our identity management system is a little bit homegrown and a lot of cobbled together. More cobbled together than homegrown. We have this affiliates database, which acts as kind of an identity management system, but we're also constrained by the numbers and types of affiliates we have, and create new affiliates is an enormous pain in the hiney. So in the new system, one of the other principles we're going to have is that everyone's an affiliate. There is no notion of to add an affiliate is hard, that you're canonical, faculty, staff, student, or affiliate. The idea is we all have affiliations, and we have to support multiple affiliations.
Right.
So you might be a parent, you might be a department chair, you might be an alumni, you might be a student, all of those at the same time.
Yep.
So we're going to support a lot more flexibility there. And going to the definitions we talked about in the data warehouse, the biggest challenge we face sort of at a process level right now is getting agreement on that. So we are literally, today or tomorrow, I will be getting an agreement from some business analysts, contract people. We're going to be bringing in to go run around and start defining this, building on the kind of definitions that the warehouse has done. But we need to be able to look at things we know about you and decide what you have access to based on that to the degree possible. So this attribute-based access control. So that'll be very big on our list. But the main thing from in terms of onboarding is we view the central person repository that will be built into the identity management system as the only place new people get added, and they get added first. Right now, you have 4 or 5 units and many departments that run their own little identity management systems for good reason, because we weren't meeting their needs. But then it's a challenge to get those fed up. And from a security, again, and sort of appropriate use perspective, it's very hard to know who has access to what and who's on campus. We don't even know this right now. So we really want to build a single front door, has many faces to it. You know, you need to be able to add a person on the fly. You need to be able to do it programmatically. You need to be able to do emergency situations and one-offs. But we want a single portal type front door that everybody comes through.
And it would be even better when it doesn't sit in our data center. So that way, if we have an outage, we can actually log into our own systems to report an outage. That's never happened before here, right?
Yeah, we're talking quite a bit about how do we balance the on-prem versus the cloud presence for all aspects of our identity management system. It troubles me that right now, if the network goes down, you can't sign into most things.
You can't sign into the status page.
It's crazy. Yeah. So we know we need to fix this.
So if you're talking about, first point of entry for any of those affiliations you mentioned, and so we're working on UCPath and our HR system and payroll system, et cetera. That might not jive the timeline. So how do you see that working?
Well, this is part of also why I'm emphasizing the shibboleth and the authentication.
Okay.
Our existing system is tied into so many applications.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just bring up the new system, turn off the old, turn on the new, or turn on the new and turn on. They're both going to live in parallel for probably a couple of years, maybe 3 years. You never know, as one quiesces and the other comes up and matures. But if you're going in through shibboleth to authenticate, you can still take advantage of the old existing authorization structures, TritonLink and all of that stuff, your warehouse to the degree it exists. You can leverage the old system for a lot of that sort of back office authorization work while the new system comes up and matures.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm nervous about the timeline on around IAM. We're hiring people right now to sort of get some momentum going on this. So I'm feeling better about it. But the reality is that this isn't a fall off a cliff type project.
Okay.
Yep. So that should make us all feel better.
Good. Yes, it does.
You want to look at the chat? I see
Oh, yeah.
11 chats. I just wanna-
Well, Shannon, are there specific questions? I'm afraid some of these will be.
That we've missed.
Yep.
Not that I see. No.
Okay.
Kevin, can I ask a question?
Sure. Go ahead, Scott.
It's related to Slate.
Yep.
First of all, that got implemented.
Yep.
And ownership of data, and who owns it, and how widely people have access to it.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Yes. Great question. No,
And
keep
then
going.
How does that interact with the new authentication system? Because, I mean, prior to Slate, when you applied, you got a PID. And we were eating up PIDs, and everybody that applied got a PID, whether they ever came or were accepted or anything.
Right.
And it's kind of a data ownership mindset. And there's a lot of chiefs at the university, and somebody, from my perspective, as a contractor, as an outsider, I can maybe say stuff that maybe employees.
Just say it. Just say it. I would say it.
There's got to be an owner that says, this is the rule, we're going to do this, and it's going to get some people mad, some people.
Yep.
Right. I love that you bring
Is there
this up.
somebody?
Yeah.
Did everyone hear that? You might want to summarize.
No, it's hard to hear when they're not right at the microphone.
Yeah, so why don't you move up, Scott? But I'll just summarize what he's saying. So with some of these systems coming online, Slate in particular, we ran into a scenario where there were too many chiefs. People couldn't agree on the ownership of data, who had access to what, and it actually created what was a very, very challenging circumstance for ITS at the last minute, because the decision to release certain information into ISIS versus not kind of went back and forth at least 6 times in the last 2 weeks. And so the answer to Scott's question is yes, there absolutely needs to be a chief that calls a shot when it comes to these things. But what we're seeing is actually, and I was actually having conversations with Jonathan Whitman about this, is that it's a culture change. In the current world, we have identified what we call data stewards. And these data stewards are the ones that goes through access link to read justifications and approve and not approve certain things. These data stewards were operating oftentimes in a departmental view, very narrowly focused, focusing primarily on their expertise of that data. And so these people who are serving as data stewards oftentimes got put into the role by accident, because they happen to be either the person who was running the registrar or the person running admissions. They themselves are the owners of a process, but are not actually consumers of the data that they have governance over. And so what we're seeing is this shift that is coming out in very ugly ways, where the data steward is saying, no, it's my decision, I'm the data steward. And you have people 3 tiers up going, wait. I need that information to make strategic decisions about what kind of students we enroll and where does this information plumb to and get access from. So imagine a room of very angry deans basically sitting there saying, you're not going to be taking away my data because I use that data to make decisions about our academic programs, about the students that we're bringing in, and you will no longer have a department making unilateral decisions about institutional data. It's going to take time. And what we're seeing is a high level and high degree of involvement from the Executive Vice Chancellor's office, as well as from Vince Kellen, our CIO, because it's a culture change, taking data that used to be owned, quote unquote, owned by a data steward, which is, like I said, somebody who's process-wise owning that process within a single department, but they're making institutional decisions about that data. And the likelihood of data stewards surviving this is quite low. I'm guessing it will likely be something that will always flow up to the top for there to be a much more unilateral top-down decision-making, because what we experienced with Slate is not going to be the first time, and it's not going to be the only time, because I'm guessing when we step through finance, we're going to have a similar situation where the data steward may or may not have that call, just like with HR, which currently is being fully decided by payroll. That's probably going to change too when we start talking about blending HR and payroll processes. And so the answer to your question in a really long-winded way is yes, there will be a top-down decision maker. It's going to take time for us to make that culture change from having data stewards to having institutional data being governed by the institution. So that Slate issue, I'm super well aware of, because I was in, gosh, I can't tell you that decision. Do we load the PID? Do we not load the PID? It went back and forth literally 6 times in the last 2 weeks. And we had a team of IT experts in ITS, as well as IT experts out in the academic units sitting there going, do I flip the switch? Do I not flip the switch? And it was literally email threads between the admissions office under enrollment management and the EDC office, with ITS and our CIO stuck in the middle. Yeah, and they're still going around about the data from Slate flowing into the Student Activity Hub. Yeah, so that the saga continues, but really, really good question. I appreciate you asking that.
There's another question on.
Guys, there's 2 questions on the chat. Oh yeah, sorry, Moshkan, didn't mean to interrupt you. There are 2 questions on the chat.
Thanks, all right, thanks, Shannon. So John asked, having worked at school medicine and customer of nightly data builds, how much coordination is currently occurring with medical systems integration with new ESR? Just curious, by the way, they have numerous identity fields.
So there's a lot of people who are actually interacting with the School of Medicine, but I'll just give a high-level summary. So the School of Medicine actually have multiple people consuming data from ESR or our current enterprise systems. Cheryl Kaino's group under the School of Medicine Dean's Office runs a small IT shop. They're heavily engaged in both the Kowali Research Project as well as our new financial project. They are also engaged on the analytics side, as are the Research Service Corps and the pre-award office under RSC, Research Service Corps. They're also heavily engaged in learning about what we're doing and how we're going to be changing things. Cheryl Kaino and I actually started an exercise going through their entire portfolio of applications and marking those applications as definitely keep, refactor, definitely going away, and maybe. And the whole reason for doing this is to start planning towards how much refactoring they will need to do when the new ESR systems comes online. So lots and lots of coordination, but they're actually touching ESR at the project level across multiple areas.
And I'll add that on the identity management side, this has been a big concern, because right now they're a big consumer of the identity system, and they make demands on us, but to be frank, they haven't been a great partner on the identity side until fairly recently. But I think we've had some breakthroughs recently where they're beginning to understand the criticality of participating in this project. And I'm optimistic that we finally have the right attention going forward.
Awesome.
So the next question from Shannon focuses on the lean bench and the number of processes that the lean bench will actually be able to work with, given the fact that there are in some areas alone. It's unlikely that they'll be able to get through all of them. So I'm going to take that.
So Prachi, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that basically what Kevin said, there's going to be hundreds and thousands of processes, so it's unlikely that we're going to touch all of them. Therefore, an exercise of prioritization of which processes are the most complex, which processes have the highest amount of friction. We're doing a prioritization with each ESR project based on those criteria, and then we're picking up the processes for review, beginning with the projects that are most active currently in the ESR realm.
And then the other thing I wanted to add is, so that question basically alludes to there's downstream department specific processes. There's inventories of processes within the department. So we're starting at the kind of a central enterprise systems start, central processes. And then we're not looking at every single department's local processes either, but we just want to make sure there's transparency so that if it impacts their downstream process, they're aware and it's appropriate. But Lean Bench is not going to descend upon every department's local process.
We have a dozen volunteers, and people are lining out the door applying to participate on the Lean Bench, which is actually super cool. The one thing, just to give an example of a process that touches both the central office as well as departments, is our pre-award office, or pre-award processes in which an academic unit who has an intention of doing research wants to apply and propose for funding. That process starts all the way out in the department, but goes all the way through the central offices before being submitted to a granting agency. And that is actually one of the most painful processes identified by the research administration community. So Prachi and the Lean Bench is actually engaged on the Quality Research Project, evaluating the pre-award processes. And the people that they're engaging are not just central offices, they're also departmental SMEs. So you get that end-to-end process map, and to be able to identify and call out where waste is and where inefficiencies are. So that way, what comes out the other end and what gets trained by our trainers out in the academic units will hopefully be a much more streamlined process, even though we didn't start from the academic units themselves and start to inventory all of their processes because we can't boil the ocean.
Other questions? We're listening.
We are listening. And you're welcome, John. I didn't know that Cheryl was your old supervisor. It's good to know.
And Prachi and I will circle back and post the response to the ESR channel on Slack. So just so folks know, we've established a channel on the UCSD Tech workspace in Slack that's called ESR, just simply ESR. And we've opened that up to anyone on campus who's on that, and mostly the tech folks are on there, and ask them to please have discussions, ask questions, etc. on there. So it's open to ITS as well, obviously. I wanted to also show that we have well, I'll just talk through it. The best way to get information is to go to the ESR website, esr.ucsd.edu, and go ahead and sign up for the newsletter. So that will give you a feed of information. Also, there's contact information there. If you want to specifically click on that, it's an email address that goes to a team. You can ask questions. Within ITS, we have our Confluence questions realm. You can use that as well. And obviously the Slack is available to anyone at ITS. So those are some ways of established channels for getting more information or asking questions.
So the one thing I want to mention about communication is that we will never be perfect when it comes to communication. Communication is something that can always be improved. What I want to say is that the expectation of communication needs to change. I would hope that ITS, being all the folks that we work with on a regular basis, are not sitting back saying to themselves, I expect ESR to communicate to me, That might be how people think about it when they're out on the campus side, but within ITS, I expect people who have questions, who are interested, who want to learn more will also reach out. So communication is a two-way streak. Please internalize, think about it, and practice it. What I don't want to ever hear is a colleague who I worked with for 10 years go, well, you never told me that X, Y, and Z was going to happen. We're sorry, we can't tell you everything, and there's absolutely no way to get every information pushed to your front door. And therefore, if you have questions, everyone's contact information is posted, and you can reach out, and we are happy to answer any questions you have. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's, you know, it's kind of blunt, but I think oftentimes we don't just say it and then it becomes kind of like interpreted in a million different ways. You know, we want people to reach out. So please don't sit back and expect communication to just come to you. And we'll have more of these sessions. We want to thank, of course, everyone for attending today, because I think the head count for our participants grew above 80 as we were talking. So obviously there's a lot of interest in this topic.
Yeah, and every question is fair and good. We don't have answers to every question, just so you know that, but as more steps are being taken, there's clarifications and processes, systems, etc., that'll be shared. Shannon put a link in the chat for a survey, but we will send that out as well to folks who are in this meeting. So just a really quick brief survey about how things went here, and just the gist of ESR. Any last thoughts in the last few minutes we have?
Okay, great. Everybody gets 4 minutes back.
We'll get 4 minutes back.
Thank you, Mojgan.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, thanks, everybody. Yeah, back to the next
restroom.
That's what I meant.
Scott, thanks for your help on this.